Welcome to another Thursday with Third Path webinar. I am so excited to have Matt Becker joining us. This is a topic that sometimes we don't realize is really at the heart of our work-life balance issues. We need time to care for our families, whether they're children, aging parents, but we also need money. And so how do you balance those two things? What's enough money? What's enough time to care? That's what we're going to be looking at today, is how to help people make some wise choices. I met Matt at a Dad 2.0 event a couple years ago and instantly took a liking to him and to what he was saying. No surprise, what I found out is that he's a shared care parent. So Matt has also personal experience on trying to really live a life where he is finding that balance between earning income and providing care for his two wonderful sons. You see them in that picture there, and have time for all the other wonderful things in life too. That's exactly what we're going to be looking at, is how do we kind of put this all together, work, family, money, so we can live the lives we want to live. Welcome, Matt. You might have a thought or two you want to share before we get started. I'm so glad you're here.
Oh, no, well, thanks for having me, Jessica. I'm happy to be here. And, the feeling was mutual when we met a couple years ago. You were fantastic, and I have a lot of admiration for what you're doing at Third Path. So I'm just excited to be here.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I'm going to go ahead and put up your first slide. You had a great analogy that you used when I met you the very first time about how to help families think about work, family, and money. Tell us a little bit about that analogy on this slide.
Sure. So just to give people a little perspective, I mean, Jessica did say it. I'm a shared parent. My wife and I share care with our kids, and she runs her own practice part-time. I run my own practice. I'm a certified financial planner, and I primarily work with new parents with young children. So this is what I do for a living, really, is help people manage the financial questions they have as they're trying to raise their family. So there are, everyone's situation is different, everyone's needs are different, but when it comes to thinking about like what goes into making good financial decisions for you and your family, what goes into creating a financial plan, I find it's helpful to compare it to building a house. And we're going to kind of go through what that means here. But I do want to say I am not incredibly handy. I actually do not know exactly how to build a house. So if you do, and cut me some slack if anything isn't 100% accurate here. But I think the analogy is going to hold up pretty well. So, yeah. So to start, if you are building a house, I mean, you do not jump right into it and start building. You start with an idea of, what do you want this house to do for you? What kind of environment do you want to live in? And then you create a blueprint, that turns those goals, those needs, those desires into a concrete vision, with measurements and specifications and all of that. So similarly, when you think about creating a financial plan, it's easy to get kind of caught up in trying to do research and hearing who says, what are the quote unquote right financial decisions. The truth is there are no right financial decisions. There are no good or bad financial moves. There are only things that are better or worse for the things you want to achieve. So it all starts with creating your financial blueprint, which really comes back to kind of your personal goals and your life goals. So what kind of life do you want to build? What kind of opportunities do you want for yourself, for your children? How do you want to spend your time? Who do you want to be with? What kind of values do you want your life to reflect? Taking stock of those personal goals, those life goals, and then trying to turn those into, what are the financial moves I need to be making in order to make those goals a reality? And that's the blueprint, just kind of outlining, again, starting with what you want from your life, and then using that to determine your financial goals and the things you want to achieve.
Yeah, and I was looking at these slides, Matt, and I love this who you want to spend your time with one. I think if those who are listening in today, you will see we have some pretty amazing people on this call talking about how they've been pretty smart around that question. And at the core of kind of helping families today, that who you want to spend your time with is a critical one, because there really are ways to think in new ways about how to do our work so we have time for other things, including our children, aging parents, our loved ones, our relationship to each other, time for ourselves. So I love that you had that who on there. Thank you so much. There might be one other thought you want to share before we go on to the next slide.
No, I think that's good.
All right, great.
So once again, going back to the building the house, you have your blueprint. The first step you usually take is laying the foundation. And the foundation is the base upon which everything else is built. When it comes to your financial plan, your foundation is really your system for managing money. So taking the income you have coming in and kind of being proactive and purposeful about what things you put that money towards. Now, this is, a lot of people talk about budgeting, and you certainly can do a budget, but it doesn't have to be a traditional budget where you set lots of limits and beat yourself up over spending too much on eating out or whatever. But having some kind of system that allows you to be purposeful, to be in control of where your money is going, that's the foundation of your financial plan, because that's what allows you to make progress towards all of the other financial goals that you want to achieve.
Yeah, and what's funny, when we were talking about this one, I actually was not so good. Our family system was not so good on this this one, but I like your word control. I think later you're going to hear from a couple of people who were really smart around putting intentional planning into place around this one. But maybe what Jeff and I did was we just kept our expenses super, super low, so that even though we didn't know or didn't have a really good plan in place, we were never overspending. We were often underspending. So we didn't get into too much trouble. I'm not saying that's the best technique, but that's.
No, that's a good point. And if we could go back to that slide actually
Sure.
for a second, I think one of the things to keep in mind, and this is a lesson I've learned personally, is that your system is probably going to evolve over time.
Yeah.
So when my wife and I started out, we had a system kind of similar to what you just described, Jessica, where we didn't manage things, we didn't kind of micromanage things, because we were able to keep our regular expenses pretty far below our income, and that was good enough. Once we got to where we had 2 kids and now we own a house and there are just more expenses, that we probably stayed in that mode for too long. And we really needed to kind of get to a more structured approach. And we eventually have, and it's been very helpful. But so just acknowledging that this system's going to change over time. There's no one right way to do it, and the right way for you will evolve.
Yeah. So maybe a word to the wise of new parents is maybe before you become new parents, put the system in place, because there's that time crunch that can happen when you have kids. So if you already have a system in place, maybe that'll help you. The other truth is that kids grow up, and so Jeff and I had more time to think about this. And luckily, we didn't get into trouble. But you will hear some stories of people who really were able to think more systematically about this too. Wonderful. Yay.
Right. So the next step of building a house, again, as far generally, you have your foundation, and then you put up the walls, you put up the roof. These are just your kind of basic security measures, keeping you safe from the outside world, keeping you dry, keeping you warm, keeping you safe from the elements. And similarly, you can kind of build financial protections. So I actually, just stepping back a little bit, I like to think generally of your financial plan as trying to do 2 things. One is provide security, where you kind of know that your basic needs are going to be handled kind of no matter what life throws your way. And the other is to provide flexibility and opportunity, which is allowing you to do what you want with your life. And this is the first side of that. So doing things like building an emergency fund, which is just money sitting in a savings account available for whatever might come up, whatever you might need, whether it's a car breaking down or an unexpected medical bill, or even a period of unemployment, whatever that is, having money set aside to be able to deal with those things. Getting some insurance in place, health insurance, life insurance, disability insurance, things that, again, just make sure that in worst case scenarios, there would be financial resources for yourself or your family. And then getting wills done and other estate planning, again, making sure that your kids would be cared for, that your partner would be cared for, again, in worst case scenarios. These are kind of the walls and the roof. These are the basic security measures protecting you financially from kind of whatever the world might throw your way.
Yeah, and what great wisdom. And again, it was like when I first heard Matt talk about this, this was such a great slide for me because here's a truth too. Sometimes partners bring in different skill sets. So I was the one who really said, hey, we need an emergency fund. We need to make sure if something happens, we've got some money set aside for that thing that we can't plan for that we're going to need to handle. And my husband was really good at the other stuff. And I wasn't resistant, but he was the one who kind of initiated moving it forward. So what's fun in families is sometimes we bring in some different strengths about how to see things, and we can make use of those different strengths. Sometimes we, bump heads too. That's a whole nother story. But it was really fun to see this slide and how Jeff and I brought in some different strengths. Any other thoughts? None required.
No, that's great.
Oh, cool. All right, tell us about this.
Yeah, so again, kind of the last step, you have your house, it's all, it's built, and then you get to kind of the fun part of you get to make it yours. You get to paint it, you get to, put furniture, artwork, you get to throw up the basketball hoop, plant your garden, whatever it is, turning that house into a home, making it yours and using it. And so similarly from the financial side, this is kind of the flexibility / opportunity side of things. Doing things like paying off debt, so that you both reduce the expenses, but also you're no longer beholden to someone else. Investing for the future, maybe saving for your child's college education. Making those decisions, those financial moves that provide opportunities for you and your family, both today and in the future, and allow you the flexibility to live the life you want on your own terms.
Yeah, and this one is always my favorite slide because I think we can get confused here, Matt. I think, I was thinking about this today. There's some study, and I should find out that study and like put it up on our website so it's constantly available, that shows a number, and I think the number is $65,000. I forget exactly, and maybe it depends on where you live and et cetera, et cetera. But there was some number that's surprisingly low, which is the number that once families hit that number and they're earning that income, much beyond that, there isn't a significant increase in joy and happiness. And so what you're getting at in this slide is that money is important for sure. Oh my goodness, for all kinds of reasons, all the things that we're talking about right here. But so is time. And so what you're really helping people think about here is what's enough. And I actually know that one of the persons who will be talking later talks a lot about that idea that what's really enough here. And I think in the families we've been working with at Third Path, they've been thinking about that all along. They've said, yes, money, I want to earn money, and my partner wants to earn money, but we also want time. And so this slide really captures this idea so well. Again, there might be something else you want to say about this, but I love this slide.
Yeah, so those are all great points. The two things. One is the income point. That I believe I have 75,000 in my head. Whatever the specific number is, it's not important. But that is definitely based in research. There's a great book, Happy Money, that I would highly recommend to anyone. Easy read, fun read, and has a lot of interesting observations about how we can actually use money to create happiness. And then to your point about time, I mean, this is why I like to talk about flexibility and opportunity, because, doing these things, paying off debt, investing, saving for the future, it might sound like someone lecturing you that you should do this, but what it really does is it gives you flexibility to make choices, to take advantage of opportunities, to do what you want with your life, as opposed to you can make all the money in the world. If you're spending all of it right away, then you don't have flexibility and you can't make choices. You are still stuck to that paycheck. And I don't mean to belittle anyone who's living paycheck to paycheck, because that is the reality for a lot of people and through no fault of their own. But to the extent you can, putting that money aside gives you, it really is freedom to do what you want with your life.
Yeah. And so stay tuned if you're listening in, because we actually have some great examples of a couple families who made some really wise choices around how they did that. And we're also, Matt and I decided we wanted to really think about new parents today and some of the challenges they face. So we're going to be getting to how do you set this up today as a new parent. So great, wonderful. All right, so we have this wonderful kind of the life-centered approach to setting financial goals. Tell us more about this, and then we're going to give you a couple of examples of people who've been using this life-centered approach. Matt, tell us.
Yeah, so this is, you're kind of going back to the financial blueprint idea of deciding what it is you want to achieve. And it can sound good, but the whole idea of setting financial goals and knowing what to prioritize and knowing what to do can be tricky. So I try to guide people through this approach, like Jessica said, life-centered approach to setting financial goals, which is basically starting with what you want out of your life, what's important to you, and turning that into actual financial decisions and things you achieve. So I'm going to go through it quickly because we could talk a lot about all these steps. But you know, the way it starts is just kind of sitting down by yourself and visualizing what a happy life looks like to you. Not 20, 30 years from now, but really just the near future, the next few years. What are you doing? Who are you spending your time with? Where are you? Those kinds of things. What does a happy life look like to you? What feels good? And just thinking about that as much as you can. Number two, going through that process again, but this time writing it all down. Just stream of consciousness, write as much as you possibly can down on a piece of paper. No editing, no filtering, anything like that. Then going through that list and taking it, and this is where you start editing and you start thinking about, all right, what of all these things I wrote down, what's most important to me, and putting them in some kind of priority order so that you could start to figure out, what do you really want to focus on most? What's most important to you? If you have a spouse or a partner, ideally they would do those 3 steps first on their own, and then you guys could come together and talk about it. If you have older kids, it'd be great to involve them as well and let them do this, and you guys could all come together and talk about it and share your ideas. This isn't about deciding ultimately whose vision is most important to your family, but trying to understand what is important to each person and coming together on at least a few kind of common goals you might share that you could start to work towards. Number 5 is actually one of my favorites. It's acknowledging what isn't on your list, because knowing what's important to you and what you want to work towards is great, but being mindful of things that aren't important to you, especially in this kind of consumer-driven culture we live in, can be really helpful. As an example, I'm not a car guy, not against anyone who loves cars. It's just not my thing. For me, a car is a way to get from point A to point B. I want it to be reliable and inexpensive. So that's helpful for me to acknowledge, because when I go out and buy a car, you're inundated with new features and all the stuff that you could spend money on. And for me to step back and say, I've acknowledged that this isn't important to me, it makes it a lot easier for me to make a decision that's aligned with the rest of my financial goals, and makes it easier for me to reach the goals that are important to me. So then taking those priorities, those things you've kind of come together and decided are most important, and turning them into SMART goals. You can see the acronym in the bottom right here. A SMART goal is just basically a way of taking an abstract idea and turning it into something you can actually achieve and measure progress against. So it should be specific, measurable, achievable, results focused, and time bound. So for example, you might say, instead of saying, I want to buy a house, you could say, like, I want to have $20,000 for a down payment in a savings account within 2 years, right? And now you've taken a goal to something that you can both that you can achieve and something that you can measure progress against. And that is now a financial goal that has come from a vision of what you want from your life. 7, you got to take action. You actually have to do some of this stuff, or else it's never going to happen. And then 8 is just acknowledging that this is not a one-time event. Your life is not static. Your goals will change. Your circumstances will change. And revisiting this process on a regular basis, maybe once a year or something like that, and just making sure that the goals you're working towards are still the goals that are important to you.
Oh my gosh, what a great summary of steps. Anybody listening in today, you do this this weekend, do this soon, because there's so much wisdom here. First, what Matt's done is said, start with yourself, get clear yourself. That's something Third Path's been saying for years. We can help couples get on the same page and imagine what they want around balancing work and family, but the place to begin is with yourself, and then to talk to your partner because then together you can start imagining, what do we want? And I know that can feel like a hurdle sometimes. Sometimes you can imagine that you're going to get into different opinions with your partner about what's a priority. And there's lots of resources out there to help you guys get on the same page. But I'll tell you, once you and your partner get on the same page around your what will make a happy life, including how to afford that happy life, you guys will then become really, unstoppable. Because when two parents see the future together and can reach for the future together, they can make amazing things happen. And you're going to hear about that in a little tiny bit. We have one of the parents we've asked to join the call. She and her partner knew they both wanted to have time for work, but also time for family. And so you're going to hear her talk about, well, what did they do to think about that before even having kids, and how did they set up their lives where they both could afford to work a 4-day work week when their child was first born, and then do that for a long, long time. So they had lots of time for work and family. So getting couples on the same page are unstoppable. And I love, number 5. That is brilliant, because you're right. We have to make choices, and knowing what's not on your list, and maybe even as your kids get older, acknowledging with your kids what's not on your list, because they can, they can get caught up in the consumer culture too, and helping them understand, hey, we chose to live in this house, we chose to drive this car, so we had plenty of time as a family. That was our priority. And so, really helping educate the whole family system about what your priorities will be, help you all moving in the right direction of achieving that happy life that you visioned. So this is fantastic. There might be something else you want to add. I love this slide. Anything else?
No, I think that's it.
Great. So one of the stories we shared when we had on the call last time was with someone named Elaine Cheney. Part of Third Path is a group of people we call our integrated life advocates. They are career counselors, couples counselors, work-life coaches who are there to help you think about these issues, like Matt helps you. And their job is to help you think a little bit about what do you want around work and life. And obviously, the people who are doing this are integrated life advocates, ILAs for short, are often people who've, experimented with this themselves in their own lives. And Elaine Cheney is somebody I met when I first started Third Path. She's now a board member. She also is a shared care parent. And when we had Matt on our call last time, she shared a number of really wise points around how she and her partner put these ideas into action. So I'm going to share a couple of the wise points that Elaine shared with us last time, and then we're going to have Lisa Levy, who's here with us today, talk a little bit about her experiences around this too. I wanted to include Elaine's story because Elaine's got an unusual story. She had a professional career, and her husband was a long-distance truck driver. And what I love about Elaine's story is that every single family can work with whatever their situation is and find the unique answer for them. So Elaine was alone with her son when her husband was out on the road, and then her husband would come home and be the person who's in charge. So they had this kind of cool shared solution where, literally he was away for a few days, then back. And one of the ways that Elaine found that to manage this best was to become her own small business owner. But what I love about Elaine's story is that she said, and this is what we're going to get up to later. Matt and I are going to talk specifically about this. When you're starting off with all this stuff, it's more difficult than a little bit later. So here was Elaine starting her business, also had a mortgage at that point in life when it felt really hard. And, there were times when it was pretty tough. But one of the things we'll be mentioning as we talk a little bit further in this call is that these things will change. So Elaine literally had a thing up on her wall to help her keep clear about, we will figure this out. Here are the ways we'll make this all work. Here's our vision for a happy life. And I will keep getting centered that I can keep on reaching for those goals. Another way she kept track of this was to have kind of manage her short-term goals over time. So they had these bigger, longer-term goals of saving for college, but then they had these shorter-term goals. And what she noticed is that they changed over time. So they couldn't do it all, but they saw over time that their son was very musically interested. So, maybe they couldn't take as big a vacation because they wanted to really support their son's musical interests. So they made some trade-offs around some of those short-term goals as their family changed. And what I also love is that they thought about a plan A and a plan B. She didn't know between her husband's job and her business whether they were going to make it work for college. And so she had a plan B. If she didn't have enough reliable income from her business to make it work for her son to graduate with as small debt as possible, she was going to go back to work. And they talked about that as a whole family. So there wasn't going to be a big surprise. Their son wouldn't feel burdened by it. This was just a reality. Well, as the world works, she had her best year ever before her son went off to college, so it wasn't an issue. But that's the kind of thing where this was not a family living with lots and lots of finances. This was a family that made it work well all the way through. Now Elaine's got lots and lots of time ahead of her because she and her husband have both retired. So they've really done good planning to get a lot of financial freedom. And clearly part of their solution was exactly what Matt talked about. What wasn't on their list. And like Matt, they were very careful about not spending on things that were not important to them. So they'd have more time for the things that were important to them. So that's a little preview of what we're going to do next. We also have a live person with us today. Lisa, I'm so glad you're here. Welcome, Lisa.
Hello.
We have, I've also known Lisa Levy forever. I always refer to her as the first shared care parent I ever met. We both remember the day like it happened yesterday because we were at a conference together and we were talking to the group at the conference using language that nobody else in the rest of the room seemed to understand, which is that men want to be involved with families. Families can make great choices around how to be flexible so they have time for work and other things. And after we kind of made a couple comments, not knowing each other, we made sure that we met each other later that day because we could tell we were speaking the same language. So Lisa, you've been someone who's made many, many wise choices around work, family, and money. I'm going to put up our little bullet point list that Lisa's going to be talking from of some of the things that she's going to talk about today. But tell us a little bit about you and some of these choices you've made around work, family, and money, Lisa.
I think that was always a starting point for us. I was in money management before I made a big career change to do consulting around diversity issues. And one of the gifts of that was that I had a lot of knowledge about, money management and had seen a lot about what kind of the mistakes people make. And I think that both my husband and I are very, good at money management, I guess you could say. And so for us, it was always about how do you have buffers of everything? How do you have buffers of time, buffers of money? We always tried to live below our means. We save for things before we buy them. I know these old-fashioned things, but anyway, and if we got a raise, or Brian's in tech, so sometimes he got a more significant bonus with organizational changes. That would never, like, we wouldn't say, let's get a bonus, we're going to buy a new car. And we're not car people anyway, but it wasn't like, oh, let's spend this. It was saying, oh, okay, that was pretty good, we could, now we have more money to save. So I think that the other thing is we're really pretty clear about what we do and don't spend money on. So, we didn't need a big giant house when we moved into our house. They want to show us much bigger, houses that require a lot more maintenance and everything. And, our house is about 2,000 square feet. So, it's not tiny, but pretty average. And just sort of that drive for stuff is, I think, not something we feel really strongly about, but we're really clear. We spend a lot of money on travel, education, and food.
Yep.
We love going out to eat. We love entertaining, and whatever. So there are certain things we spend a lot of money on, but many things that are much less important to us. So I think it's given us, many choices in life. And I always associated money and flexibility together.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, again, you raise, as usual, wonderful points. This idea of a buffer, not just with money, which we talked about with Matt. Having a rainy day fund, et cetera, putting savings aside, but a buffer around time, and that's exactly where I wanted to go. Now, there might be more things we want to talk about, but for a long, long time, you and your partner were able to work a 4-day work week. So you both made some choices way before your first son was born about how to do that. And some of that was a financial choice. Think about parents today. What can you help them think about that would help them prepare for this idea of being able to afford to work a 4-day work week? And why was that so valuable? Tell us more about that.
How can you afford, I think, is, again, I think if I were going to talk about it in a big picture, it's keep your fixed expenses quite manageable, and you can do whatever you want with your variable expenses because you can shut them off whenever you don't, whenever you need to. So,
Right.
I mean, we kind of always came from that place. So we keep our cars a long time and we buy, blah, blah, blah. So I think we never felt that pressure of, we need to be whatever. So, and the other thing that struck us is to have two people working almost full time, certainly a lot more than having one person. This idea of males have been the breadwinner, and I know that's much less the case now, but as you know, Jessica, I write and talk and speak a lot about this issue of the single provider model is so precarious and inflexible, and it's anathema to choice. One of my husband's sort of say, or one of the times he's talking about when I was, talking to him about this, he said it's sort of like if you're, if you're on the edge of something, if you're walking on sort of the edge of something, if it's a foot, if you fell versus 500 feet, you're going to make decisions. And I think again, many people, but many situations where there are families where you have one provider and often it is the male, that there's very little sense of I can push back on unreasonable limits. I can quit my job if and look for another one. Again, there's sort of no buffer in the system. You're at your edge. So
Yeah.
I think for us it seemed like, well, this is more than we need. I mean, to
Yes.
have two almost full-time jobs was absolutely fine.
Yeah.
So, we're lucky. I was, in the kind of work we did, I think that that's not the situation for everyone, certainly. But what I find ironic is a lot of people that I feel like I do know for whom that is absolutely their situation. I mean, they really feel so not flexible. And now that, we're sending our kids to college, and not, needing to draw financial assistance, I see so many people who feel like they're kind of pushed against the wall that, have dual career couples and stuff. And so, working in fields that are pretty well paying. And so I think that some of it was just we had a philosophical difference around how we approached money.
Yeah. Well, you know what I'm hearing, it's interesting for the first, I learn something every time I do one of these calls, and I want to give you guys a heads up of where we're going next. These are live events. And so we're going to be talking a little bit about, okay, so Lisa and I have grown children. How is it different today? Why is this more or less challenging today for parents to do what Lisa's talking about, what I've done? And that's where we're going next. But one of the things I hear in Lisa's story today that is an aha for me is that concept of a buffer of time and a buffer of money. So what happened, Lisa, is living a life where you have a little bit more time means you probably had more time to think about these things, And if we're rushing through a full day of work, and then coming home and doing everything around family at the end of the day when we're exhausted, and then doing errands over the weekend, and then repeating the whole thing on Monday, you don't actually have time to say, how do I take that courageous step to move to a 4-day work week? How do I make choices today that will make my financial dreams more affordable later? We need time to do money. So you guys actually created that buffer of time, gave you some time to think about this stuff. What do you think about that, Lisa?
I mean, to us, it was sort of bring the intensity down.
Yeah,
Yeah. People are, the world is really intense now.
Yeah.
And so our feeling was, how can we create a cocoon in our own lives to the extent we had influence? And there's a zillion things we don't have any influence over, clearly.
Yeah.
But places, what do we do?
Yeah.
How can we do that differently? So we have dinner together every night. Well, now our older guy's in college, so not quite that same, but that was always a priority. And after dinner, we put on music and homework or work or just sit or whatever. And so it's weird because I don't think we were. It was sort of the sense of what's possible versus what's not possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it was sort of trying to be radical, but it's very interesting how I know deeply that people feel really buffeted by life, that it's hard and it's scary and there's no protection in the city and whatever. But to the extent possible, to me, it's sort of, where do you find the openings in your own situation to try to give yourself again more of that freedom.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. So I want to move us to this thinking about new parents today, because again, we hope these webinars are a chance for you to learn some important things and think ahead about how you can create quite an exciting life. But we're also aware that times have changed and things are hard. So where we're going to go next is to talk a little bit about today's parents. And Matt and I have thought ahead about this to kind of think about what's a family to do, because many parents today are graduating with debt from college. The cost of housing is crazy compared to when I was looking for a house, many, many years ago. Childcare is expensive. So it can feel very difficult to figure out how to make this work. Talk about fixed expenses. If you've already got college debt, and you've already got, you've already set yourself up in a really expensive house, and then you're facing high child care costs. You've got some pretty high fixed expenses. Fixed expenses meaning those are the things that you have a harder time changing in the short run. So Matt, you work with new parents. Let's take a stab at thinking about what can we do to help parents think about this today. Maybe some we've already addressed. And then what we're going to do is stop and see if those listening in today have some thoughts or questions that they want to ask about this. This is a live event, so when you tune into a Thursday webinar, you get to join the conversation. We will stop the recording during the live event part of the call and then restart it afterwards. Matt, how do you help parents today? It's not so easy. Help us.
No, it's challenging. I mean, for a lot of the reasons you mentioned, and even just generally kind of this life stage, you are generally still, in the earlier parts of your career, so you're not kind of at full earning potential, and you have a lot of new expenses. I mean, childcare especially is a huge one that is kind of often biggest at this earlier stage. So it's challenging, and student loan debt makes it challenging, and housing prices make it challenging. I mean, I would start with kind of the mental side of things. First, just recognizing that the challenges facing young families today are different than what our parents face, and the expectations that might be passed down to you either from what you experienced as a child and assuming that you should be able to do that same thing, or what you hear from your parents and what you should be doing. Those may not just align with the realities of the world today, and that's not good or bad. It's just acknowledging that there are differences. And acknowledging that maybe even the harder part is acknowledging that you don't have to do all of the same things that your friends and colleagues and neighbors are doing. And because I think it's easy to get caught up in just like, oh, well, everyone I know is doing this, I should do this too. And centering it back on what we talked about before with what is important to you and what can you do to make that possible. And that might mean making some decisions that are different than the people around you. When it comes to specifics, I think one of the big ones that, you always hear that you're supposed to buy a house, that you have to buy a house. It's kind of this marker of like that you've made it and that you're financially stable. My wife and I rented for a long time, and I encourage people to rent much more frequently than I think is the norm, for a lot of reasons. But it really can decrease kind of the financial risk you have, because owning a house comes with a lot of risk. It can decrease your short-term costs, and unless you're really sure you're going to be in one location for an extended period of time, it can actually save you money compared to buying. So do not being afraid to rent. That might be one of those kind of unconventional decisions compared to your friends, family, coworkers, but that could actually end up being a good decision for you. Student loans specifically, they're just understanding kind of what options you have available to you. There are income-driven repayment plans. Depending on what type of work you do, you may even be able to have some of your loans forgiven. But understanding those options available to you and taking advantage of them. And then just more generally, I would say, there's no one solution. Any good solution is going to start with being honest about your financial situation, honest about your needs, honest about what money is coming in, where is that money going, and then taking one step at a time to be proactive about it. And to, you're probably not going to be able to do all of the things you want to do right away, but you can probably make one improvement at a time, make one step forward at a time. But that's only going to happen if you are kind of willing to, look at this stuff and be honest with yourself, not judgmental. You don't need to beat yourself up over anything, but just being honest about it and taking steps to get yourself going in whichever direction you want to be going in.
Wow, that so many words of wisdom there. So I'm going to underscore a couple of them. And then what I'm going to do is stop the recording and have people see if they want to add in some thoughts about what new parents can do today, or if they have some other questions for Matt or for Lisa. But let me start by underscoring a couple of wise things that Matt just shared. I love this point that you new parents today might be living a very different life than what your parents were doing. And that those expectations from the past really can mess us up. I can even resonate with that as with grown children, because there were some pretty strong messages around how I was supposed to live my life, what size house I was supposed to own, how fancy it was supposed to look. And I really made a very, very different choice from that, because again, I wanted financial freedom. I was okay living in a fine house, a livable house, a house that had a roof over it, that wasn't, a fine house. However, I think Matt goes on to talk about maybe don't even buy a house, because think about it. One of the other big expenses is school. And so just looking at my own neighborhood, we actually know a couple where they moved to our neighborhood and rented because there was a good school in our neighborhood. And renting was possible, but buying wasn't possible. So their son went to this great school. They actually moved from near New York to Philadelphia because they knew for the next 5 years they could have their son go to this great school and they could rent. Now, if they had owned a house, that would have been much more complicated. So there's some real wisdom in these two possible big expenses, where you live and where your kids go to school. By renting, you actually create a little bit more flexibility around, how to make it all work. So those are awesome. There might be one more quick point you want to make, Matt. Otherwise, I'll see if Lisa wants to make a quick point about what we've been talking about. And then I'm going to stop the recording and open it up to the audience to see if they have some thoughts they want to share or questions for Matt or Lisa. Matt, one last quick point about this slide.
Sure. Just, obviously this is something you talk about all the time, but just the idea of being creative with how you care for your children, how you spend your time between work and childcare.
Yeah.
Not everyone has that flexibility, but if you can be creative about that, that can certainly help a lot as well.
Yeah, yeah. For example, we have a wonderful story we gathered way back when I first started Third Path. And, the father worked on the tarmac at the airport. So he was the guy, working the planes coming in. The wife worked at a bank. She felt like she had the least flexibility. And the grandma worked at in one of those big discount stores. But between the three of them, they worked their schedules so that they could make it work. So it's kind of expanding who is helping you make it work, thinking about the flexibility in that specific job that you do, and working, creating that team at home to think about this really makes a difference. Lisa, is there a thought you want to share, advice for new parents that we haven't talked about so far, and then we'll open it up to the audience.
I guess I would go back to what we've been saying about that's really trying to figure out, like Matt was saying, about what's important to you.
Yep.
And connecting that with your partner.
Yep.
Because as to me, one of the things that I think we spend far too little money on is like the health of the partner relationship.
Yeah.
Get a babysitter, do a babysitting, babysitting, a caretaking swap kind of thing or whatever. It doesn't have to be expensive, but like having that special time to be away from all the intensity of life and stuff. So, but it's to the extent like, compromising or trying to get more on the same page. I think we all know money is one of the hugest sort of things that can really divide couples, but it's very, I have a good friend, actually, Jessica, someone we both know, who I think there was some disconnect in the couple about, we're going to go and we're going to look for this new house and it's going to be bigger and we want the kids to go to private school and, like, what are all the implications for these things?
Yeah.
And, it was sort of the courage to say, whoa, that, like, all that talk makes me feel a lot of pressure to stay in a job that I'm feeling extremely unhappy in. And, I think that can take a lot of courage to say that to your partner.
Yeah.
I think there's a powerful opening if you can do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, wonderful point. And I love the idea that you invest in the happiness of you and your partner too. Again, the more you and your partner are on the same page, including investing some time to stay on the same page, that it all works better. And there's resources out there. If you feel like you're going to struggle to get on the same page with your partner, we have people who can help you. So please, that's a core takeaway today, is that getting on the same page with your partner around your work, family, and money goals. Then you can both row in the same direction. And whatever comes your way, you can kind of think about how to make it work. So I'm literally going to take off the recording for a second. So we are back. What a great discussion. I think one of the takeaways was this concept of a money philosophy for a family, one that doesn't feel too rigid, and includes, again, back to that phrase of happy. What makes you happy? What makes you happy as a family? One of the things that Lisa did a great job was saving as a family for bigger vacations together. And so it's really thinking about what is your family's money philosophy. And by the way, what we're doing as parents is we're role modeling to our kids some great ways to approach life that hopefully will make it easier for them to make some wise choices. Well, believe it or not, we're at the top point in the call where we are at the wrap-up stage. So I'm going to give Lisa a chance to say if she has any last thoughts she wants to share, and then I'm going to, of course, give the last word to Matt. But this has been exactly what I wanted, a chance for people to really think smart about how you can do work, family, and money in a different way. It might be different than your neighbors, different than your parents, but a way that really is in line with what's important to you. What's your last takeaway, Lisa?
It's a very recent thing that happened, which is sort of funny. So our older son, who just turned 21, for his 21st birthday, we gave him some gifts, and one of them were sunglasses, polarized sunglasses. And we went to this, and I found this place called Warby Parker that's basically they had cut out the middleman, and so they're really nice sunglasses for maybe, $90 instead of like $300. So I
Right.
was all excited about that. Well, we go to get the sunglasses with him, and he's like, Mom, I just don't think I can buy these. They're too expensive. I don't need well, I'm not going to get $100 sunglasses. I'm like, it's your 21st birthday, honey. You're not paying for it. And I actually scouted out a place that was a really good deal. This is okay. And it was hilarious. And I told him, because my husband lost his a few years ago. He had them for like 25 years. He never loses anything. And so I said, and if you get some, then Dad'll feel more comfortable getting some, which he did. So it's just this hilarious conversation.
Wonderful.
But I was sort of, you got to take the ground, sweetie. You got to find in between.
Yep, that's great, because really what you have obviously modeled well for your children, some good choices there, so wonderful. So what you're seeing on the screen is also every 2 years, only every 2 years, we have an amazing event happening in Philadelphia. Lisa Levy will be there. I'm so excited, but we are looking for a couple more dads if they want to come. You can go to our website and learn more about it, or you can email us at timeforlife@thirdpath.org, and we'd love to have you come to this amazing event. You might have a last thought you want to share, Matt. This has been fantastic. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. It's been a lot of fun. I guess the last thought I'd share is just that this stuff is hard, and it's hard for everyone. It's hard for me, even though it's what I do for a living. When it comes to my personal stuff, it's hard. So, don't feel ashamed. It's normal for it to be hard. If you're struggling with it, just ask for help. There are lots of people who are willing to help, and so just don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help, to whoever.
That's great. That's a great idea. And I think I'm going to go look up that Happy Money book that you talked about too. That sounds like it would be a good resource for people to check into. Wonderful. Well, thank you everybody for another amazing Thursday with Third Path webinar. Next month, we have somebody talking about late career issues. All year long, we've been looking at how you can think about work, family issues across the life course. So join us again next time. Thanks, everybody.